Elizabeth Thornhill stood at the window of her late brother's plantation house, watching the Spanish moss sway in the Georgia breeze. The reading of Jonathan's will had concluded an hour ago, leaving her mistress of Willow Creek estate and guardian to her three nieces, Charlotte, 17, Abigail, 15, and Mary, 13. The girls, orphaned years before by their mother's passing and now fatherless, relied solely on their formidable aunt for guidance. Miss Elizabeth, Samuel, the house steward, spoke from the doorway. "The girls await in the parlor as you requested." Elizabeth nodded, smoothing her black mourning dress. "Very well, I'll join them shortly." As she traversed the grand hall of Willow Creek, Elizabeth contemplated her new role. Jonathan had left substantial debts, but the plantation held value. The cotton harvest promised income, and the 46 enslaved individuals represented significant assets. Yet, Elizabeth needed more to sustain the lifestyle she envisioned. The three Thornhill girls rose as Elizabeth entered the parlor. Charlotte, the eldest, bore her father's resolute jaw and sharp eyes. Abigail, delicate and fair, echoed their mother's likeness. Young Mary, still childlike with her round face, clutched a small cloth doll. "Be seated," Elizabeth directed. The girls complied instantly. "You understand your father's death changes everything. This estate and all within it are now mine." Charlotte spoke cautiously. "Father said we'd always have a home here, and so you shall." Elizabeth replied, her tone cool and measured. "But you must contribute. There are debts to settle, and Willow Creek demands proper management. We'll assist however we can, Aunt," Abigail offered softly. Elizabeth's thin lips curved faintly. "You're of marriageable age, Charlotte. Abigail soon will be, and Mary in time. Your father's Savannah connections will secure suitable matches." Charlotte's hands twisted in her lap. "I hope to pursue my studies." "Nonsense," Elizabeth snapped. "Women require no excessive learning. Your role is to secure advantageous marriages for this estate's benefit." Silence fell, heavy with unspoken dissent. Outside, a mockingbird's varied notes sounded jarringly cheerful against the room's tension. "You'll attend social functions next month, after the initial mourning period," Elizabeth continued. "I've received inquiries about your availability from prominent families." Mary looked up, confused. "But what about Charlotte's writing? Father always said—" "Your father overindulged you," Elizabeth interrupted. "That ends now. This plantation must thrive, and you three are resources to be leveraged." As darkness fell over Willow Creek, Charlotte stood at her bedroom window, watching lanterns light the path to the slave quarters. Her father had been a relatively lenient master by 1843 Georgia standards, but Charlotte held no illusions about Aunt Elizabeth's nature. "Charlotte," Abigail whispered, slipping into the room, "what will happen to us?" Charlotte drew her sister close. "We'll endure. Father taught us resilience." "I overheard the cook," Abigail said, voice trembling. "Aunt Elizabeth sold 2 people today, Moses and his daughter, Lily. They were taken this afternoon while we were upstairs." Charlotte's breath caught. Moses had been at Willow Creek longer than she'd been alive. "We must be cautious, Abby, very cautious." Later, Charlotte crept downstairs, drawn by voices from her father's study. Through the partially opened door, she saw Elizabeth with a stranger, all expensively dressed, with cold eyes. "The eldest has spirit that needs taming," Elizabeth was saying, "but properly managed, she'll fetch a high bride price from the right family." "And if she resists?" the man asked. Elizabeth's laugh was sharp, like shattering glass. "There are always ways to ensure obedience, Mr. Blackwood, always." Charlotte retreated silently, heart pounding. In Willow Creek's shadows, she realized they were no longer just grieving children. They were commodities in their aunt's ruthless calculations. Within 2 weeks of Elizabeth Thornhill's arrival, Willow Creek transformed. Gone were the books Jonathan had encouraged his daughters to read, replaced with manuals on feminine deportment. The girls' vibrant dresses were swapped for summer, constrictive garments Elizabeth deemed suitable for marriage prospects. Charlotte resisted quietly, hiding her father's books under floorboards, writing by candlelight after the household slept. But Elizabeth was unnervingly vigilant. "What's this?" she demanded one morning, holding Charlotte's journal, found during a room inspection, scribbling nonsense instead of needlework. Charlotte stood rigid. "Those are private thoughts, Aunt. Nothing here is private from me," Elizabeth replied, tossing the journal into the fireplace. The flames consumed it instantly. "Your father's indulgence made you willful. That ends now." The next day, Charlotte was paired with Hezekiah Blackwood, the man from the study, at a Savannah luncheon. At 43 to her 17, he was a widower with shipping interests and political ties. "Your aunt praises your domestic skills," Blackwood remarked, eyeing Charlotte like livestock. "My interests extend beyond domesticity, sir," Charlotte replied carefully. Blackwood's smile was cold. "Spirit can be redirected with proper guidance." In the carriage back to Willow Creek, Elizabeth gripped Charlotte's wrist tightly. "You'll encourage Mr. Blackwood's interest. His offer could clear your father's debts." "He's older than father was," Charlotte protested. "Age brings wisdom and connections." Elizabeth countered, "Your romantic notions are childish." That evening, Abigail found Charlotte in the garden, tears streaming. "What happened in Savannah?" she asked, sitting beside her on a stone bench. "Aunt Elizabeth plans to sell me like a field hand," Charlotte whispered. "To a man who sees me as property." Abigail paled. "We could run away. To where, with what funds?" Charlotte shook her head. "I won't leave you and Mary." Their talk was interrupted by Thomas Cooper, Elizabeth's newly hired overseer, notorious for brutality. Several enslaved people already bore his whip's marks. "Miss Charlotte, Miss Abigail," he greeted, tipping his hat, his contempt undisguised. "Your aunt requests you in the main house. You shouldn't wander unsupervised." Charlotte felt his gaze burn as they walked ahead. Inside, they found Elizabeth with Mary, who sobbed quietly. "Your sister was caught giving food to that pregnant girl in the quarters. Hannah, I believe," Elizabeth said coldly. "She's expecting soon," Mary said through tears. "They cut her rations." "Silence," Elizabeth snapped. "Worker management isn't your concern. As punishment, you'll skip dinner for a week." Charlotte stepped forward. "She's 13, and you'll join her for questioning my authority," Elizabeth finished. "Mr. Cooper, ensure they stay in their rooms tonight." As Cooper escorted them upstairs, he leaned close to Charlotte. "Your aunt permits me to enforce discipline as I see fit, Miss Charlotte. Remember that." That night, Charlotte heard commotion from the slave quarters. Peering out, she saw lanterns moving frantically. Hannah was in labor, and something was wrong, Charlotte decided. Slipping past the sleeping house servant Elizabeth had posted, she grabbed medical supplies and headed to the quarters. If she couldn't yet escape her aunt's plans, she could help where possible. By dawn, Charlotte returned, exhausted but triumphant. Hannah had delivered healthy twin boys. Her victory faded when she found Elizabeth waiting in the entrance hall, Cooper at her side. "Discipline requires a firmer hand," Elizabeth said, her voice icy. "Mr. Cooper, make arrangements. Charlotte will depart for Savannah tomorrow to stay with the Blackwoods. Their supervision may prove more effective." The Blackwood mansion in Savannah stood like a fortress amid live oaks draped with Spanish moss. Charlotte's carriage passed through wrought iron gates that clanged shut with ominous finality. The 3-week visit her aunt arranged felt like exile, or inspection before sale. Mrs. Winthrop, the stern housekeeper, showed Charlotte to a well-appointed second-floor room. "Mr. Blackwood expects you for tea at 4. You'll find suitable attire in the wardrobe." Charlotte opened the mahogany doors to find elaborate dresses in pale hues, emphasizing innocence. The message was clear. She was being packaged for presentation. At 4, Charlotte descended in a pale blue gown that felt like a costume. Hezekiah Blackwood awaited in a parlor overlooking a manicured garden. "Miss Thornhill," he greeted, his smile practiced. "I trust you're settling comfortably." "The accommodations are generous," Charlotte replied cautiously. Blackwood gestured to the tea service. Your aunt mentions your pianoforte talent. Perhaps you'll perform after tea. The conversation was excruciatingly polite, Blackwood probing her education, skills, and health like a checklist. Charlotte responded precisely, hiding her turmoil. After playing the grand piano, she was allowed to retire early. Alone, she explored her surroundings, testing locked doors and windows for potential escape. On her third day, Charlotte found the library, a vast room of floor-to-ceiling shelves that would have delighted her father. She was examining Shakespeare when a voice startled her. Most young ladies prefer romance novels to the bard's tragedies. An elderly man watched from a leather armchair, thin, elegantly dressed, with intelligent eyes reminiscent of her father. "I'm Edward Blackwood." He introduced himself, Hezekiah's uncle, an unwelcome remnant here. "Charlotte Thornhill," she replied, shelving the book. "I didn't mean to intrude." "Nonsense. Few use this room but me." He gestured to a chair. "How do you find Savannah?" His genuine interest, unlike Hezekiah's calculated assessment, prompted honesty. "Beautiful, but confining, sir." Edward's laugh held no mockery. Aptly put for most beautiful things in this society. He studied her. "You're here as a prospective bride for my nephew." Charlotte's silence confirmed it. "I thought so." He sighed. "Hezekiah seeks a specific wife. His first, poor Margaret, failed to provide an heir before consumption claimed her." Over the next week, Charlotte and Edward formed an unlikely alliance. In daily library meetings, he shared the Blackwood family's history, including Hezekiah's ruthless business and desperation for a male heir. "He has 2 daughters from his first marriage," Edward explained one rainy afternoon, "sent to Charleston boarding school after their mother's death. He considers them disappointing investments." Charlotte's blood chilled. "And what of his associate, Mr. Cooper?" Edward's expression darkened. "Thomas Cooper, a deplorable man handling Hezekiah's unsavory transactions. Keep your distance." That night, sleepless, Charlotte noticed activity in the courtyard. Men unloaded crates from a wagon with furtive haste, directed by Cooper. Next morning, feigning illness to skip breakfast, Charlotte investigated the cellars where the crates went. Using a passageway Edward mentioned, she navigated servants' areas and damp stone steps. A hairpin unlocked the cellar door, revealing not wine storage but a holding area with iron restraints and the stench of human suffering. Charlotte stifled a gasp. The Blackwoods were illegally trading Africans, defying the 1808 ban, hiding them until they could be passed off as local enslaved offspring. As she turned to flee, Charlotte collided with Thomas Cooper, blocking her exit with a triumphant sneer. "Curiosity's dangerous, Miss Thornhill," he said, gripping her arm. "Mr. Blackwood will be disappointed. He'll worry more about federal authorities finding this," Charlotte countered, struggling to stay calm. Cooper laughed, the sound echoing off stone. "Who do you think protects this operation? Your aunt was right. You need correction to be a suitable wife." As he dragged her to Hezekiah's study, Charlotte realized her aunt hadn't sent her to Savannah just as a bride. She'd sold her into a nightmare. Charlotte sat rigidly at her writing desk in her now prison-like room. 2 weeks after her cellar discovery, Hezekiah detailed his illegal operations with chilling pride and his expectations for her as his wife. "Your role is simple," he said coldly. "Provide heirs, maintain a flawless social image, and stay silent on business matters." When Charlotte threatened exposure, he smiled. "Your aunt received a substantial advance. Uncooperation will cost your sisters dearly." Now, Charlotte wrote weekly letters to Abigail and Mary under Mrs. Winthrop's scrutiny, coding pleas for help in innocuous phrases. "I hope this letter finds you well," she wrote, emphasizing certain letters in a childhood code with Abigail. "The weather remains oppressive, though Mr. Blackwood says one grows used to city confinement." A knock interrupted her. Mrs. Winthrop announced, "Mr. Edward requests you in the library." Escorted downstairs, Charlotte found Edward alone, his casual facade gone. "You're in grave danger, child," he said quietly. "Hezekiah plans to announce your wedding in Saturday's paper." Charlotte paled. "There's been no proposal. Your aunt's arrangement is a binding contract to him. The ceremony's in 3 weeks. I can't," Charlotte began, voice breaking. Edward produced a key and letter from his waistcoat. "This opens the garden gate. Take only what you can carry discreetly. The letter has instructions and money for northern passage." "Why help me?" Charlotte whispered, hiding the items. Edward softened. "I failed to protect others from my nephew's cruelty. This might balance my ledger." That night, Charlotte barely slept, torn between hope and fear for her sisters. Dawn confirmed Hezekiah's Charleston departure. By mid-morning, Charlotte hid clothes and Edward's money under her shawl. Heading to the garden, Cooper's voice stopped her. "Going somewhere, Miss Thornhill." He stepped from a room, blocking her. "Just the garden for air," Charlotte said calmly. Mrs. Winthrop permitted it. His smile was cold, strange to need a bundle for a stroll. Before she could reply, a young enslaved woman burst in. "Fire in the stables, Mr. Cooper." He hesitated, then ordered, "Stay here," rushing out. Charlotte slipped through a side door to the garden, unlocked the gate, and entered a narrow alley. Following Edward's instructions, she headed to the docks, keeping her pace unhurried despite her racing heart. The harbor buzzed with sailors, merchants, and travelers. Charlotte found the Northern Star, Edward's designated ship, preparing for departure. As she neared the gangplank, Cooper seized her arm. "Found you," he hissed. Your stable distraction was clever but inadequate. Her cry drowned in the harbor's noise as he shoved her toward a carriage. A commanding voice intervened. "Release that woman immediately." A uniformed officer approached with 2 armed men. Cooper tightened his grip. "This is private, sir. I have a warrant for illegal activities at the Blackwood property," the officer said, showing a document. "This lady may have information." Cooper reached for a weapon, but Charlotte twisted free, stumbling to the officers. "He's involved in illegal slave trading. Evidence is in the Blackwood cellars." The officer steadied her, signaling Cooper's arrest. Turning to the Northern Star, Charlotte saw Edward on deck, waving farewell beside a woman resembling Hezekiah's late wife. "Margaret Blackwood's sister," the officer explained. "She's gathered evidence against her brother-in-law for years, suspecting foul play in her sister's death." Charlotte gripped the officer's arm. "My sisters are at Willow Creek with my aunt. They need protection." "Already underway, Miss Thornhill. A detachment was sent this morning." Amid Savannah's harbor chaos, Charlotte felt fragile hope stir. The 17-day journey to Philadelphia was a liminal space, sharing cramped quarters with a missionary's widow, a seamstress, and Mrs. Harlow, a shrewd older woman. Charlotte guarded her story. On the 7th night, Mrs. Harlow whispered, "You're running from something." Charlotte touched her sister's locket. "What makes you say that?" "I recognize the look," Mrs. Harlow replied. Charlotte shared enough, and Mrs. Harlow, tied to Philadelphia's abolitionists, promised introductions. "There are people who can help find your sisters." In Philadelphia, September's crisp air greeted Charlotte. Mrs. Harlow led her to Ruth Pennington's boarding house, a haven for women in distress. "Stay here while we inquire," Mrs. Harlow advised. Charlotte assisted with accounts and taught literacy to an Irish maid, scanning newspapers for Blackwood case updates. Only vague mentions of Savannah shipping irregularities. On an October Tuesday, Ruth handed Charlotte a telegram, "Subject secure, arriving Philadelphia October 14th, meet Central Station, noon, Marshall." Tears blurred Charlotte's vision. "They're alive." The next 10 days buzzed with preparations. Ruth secured neighboring accommodations, and Mrs. Harlow arranged employment and education prospects. On October 14th, Charlotte stood at Central Station, heart-pounding. Mary's voice pierced the crowd. "Charlotte?" Thinner but joyful, Mary ran to her, followed by a subdued but smiling Abigail and Marshall Jennings. Their reunion overflowed with tears and laughter. Jennings explained, "We reached Willow Creek 2 days after your escape. Your aunt fled with valuables. Cooper's associate resisted arrest and was shot. The enslaved at Willow Creek?" Charlotte asked. "Under court protection until ownership is resolved. Your father's lawyer has documents suggesting he intended emancipation for many." Hezekiah Blackwood, Charlotte pressed. "Arrested in Savannah. Evidence from his cellars is substantial. Trials in December, but men like him often evade full consequences." That evening, in Ruth's parlor, Abigail and Mary recounted Elizabeth's intensified cruelty, confining Mary to the attic for warning Hannah about her twins' sale. "She told Savannah you'd had a nervous collapse," Abigail said, "that you were with the Blackwoods for treatment." Mary added, "The night before the marshals, I overheard her planning to declare me unstable too, since Abigail had no suitors." Charlotte held them close, their escape's weight sinking in. Alone with Ruth, Charlotte faced their reality. "We have no home, no income, no protector." Ruth kneaded dough steadily. "You have education, intelligence, and each other. In Philadelphia, that's something." That night, Charlotte wrote in a new journal from Mrs. Harlow, vowing their story wouldn't fade. "The Thornhill sisters do not end here," she wrote. "This is the beginning of a story we author." Philadelphia's relentless pace contrasted Savannah's gentility. With 3 months' funds from court restitution, the sisters planned self-sufficiency. Charlotte became a publisher's copyist, accessing literary circles. Abigail secured bookkeeping work at a dry goods store. Mary, too young for formal work, taught piano to beginners, starting with their landlady's daughter. By Thanksgiving, they were working women with modest value, connecting with independent women like Dr. Elena Blackwell, a physician. At Dr. Blackwell's, Charlotte learned of the women's rights movement, seeing her experiences as systemic inequities. A January lecture at the Franklin Institute introduced Samuel Gardner, a Bostonian tied to Marshall Jennings. "Our consortium wants to buy Willow Creek for railway expansion," he said. "It would secure your finances and remove harassment motives." Charlotte insisted on freeing the enslaved and prosecuting Elizabeth. "Justice complicates business," Gardner noted, "but profitable," Charlotte replied. By spring, their Philadelphia life stabilized, but a telegram warned, "Blackwood escaped custody. Cooper still at large. Exercise caution." Ruth alerted allies, and the sisters adopted vigilance, escorts, varied routes, and lookouts. A journalist's letters revealed Blackwood's corruption slowing justice. In April, Edward and Catherine Blackwood arrived at Ruth's. Catherine, Hezekiah's daughter, said, "My father's rebuilt his network. Charges may be dismissed by summer." Edward added, "Elizabeth's out on bail, seen at his residence." Catherine suspected her sister Margaret's death was poisoning, not typhoid, after uncovering their mother's similar fate. "I fled when he arranged my marriage to a brutal associate," she said. "They offered evidence, financial records, manifests, needing Charlotte's link to Jennings." Abigail cautioned a trap, but Mary saw parallels to their ordeal. Charlotte agreed to transfer the evidence to Jennings. Her publisher's rush project forced Abigail to meet Catherine at a Quaker meeting house. Mary's child lookouts reported Southern men inquiring about them. At Dr. Blackwell's, Charlotte announced, "Blackwood's men are here. We move the evidence and Catherine to federal custody now." Dr. Blackwell arranged for Catherine to travel as her assistant, hiding documents in medical texts. Charlotte would decoy by train, while Abigail and Edward took back roads with the evidence. Mary stayed in Philadelphia's Quaker network. On Friday, Charlotte, Dr. Blackwell, and Catherine boarded the train, eyed by 2 Southern men. At Wilmington, one approached. "Miss Thornhill, Cooper sends regards." Charlotte denied her identity. Near Maryland, men on a rural platform signaled an ambush. Dr. Blackwell swung her bag, hitting one, shouting, "Now!" Charlotte and Catherine fled forward, climbing the tender's ladder to the roof. Below, federal marshals arrested the men. In the baggage car, a porter warned of Southern men on board. A male worker helped them exit to tall grass. Halfway to Woods, Goldtooth and another pursued, firing. A carriage, Abigail, Edward, and Jennings swerved to them. Jennings fired, forcing cover. "The evidence is safe in Baltimore," he said. Abigail delivered it. As the carriage sped away, Charlotte's fear eased. "It's over," she whispered. Jennings sobered, not yet, but closer. The darkness continues in part 2. Next video see.